Chat whenever.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you around the world. Welcome to Trading Rebellion with Trade the Chain and Market Rebellion. My name is Nick Mancini, Director of Research at Trade the Chain, joined by CJ and Monty, Senior Research Analyst at Market Rebellion. We are here to break down everything going on in crypto, TradeFi, macro, and every single financial markets buzzword you can think of. So we have this show every Monday and Thursday. So whatever happens this coming week, we will again break it down for you on Thursday. But let's go ahead and dive into this week. So we obviously had the crypto collapse over the weekend, very illiquid trading weekend. Again, we've actually seen a couple of dumps on late Friday evening. So maybe we'll discuss a little bit about that pattern making. But when it comes to what is next, how do we digest what's going on after the crypto collapse, I want to point you to the macro headlines for the week. So today is Monday, nothing too significant, but tomorrow we have CPI, the consumer price index, very important inflation metric. And following that, we have PPI on Wednesday, along with the FOMC decision, which currently is expected to be no hike, a pause in hiking. If you've been listening to the B3 show or listened to us last week, we discussed a little bit about this, but we'll discuss it more today. And then, of course, Jerome Powell will make his press conference afterwards, which typically is where we see that solidification of momentum as it pertains to price action. So the other big news this week, more crypto related, is the Hinman documents are likely to be unsealed tomorrow. Of course, there is no official confirmation, but this is the word on the street as it has been advertised. So people will be looking very closely to this. This may end up breeding some volatility, but we'll discuss it a little bit later. And then the SEC is has been ordered to respond to Coinbase's petition for rulemaking by the judge in the SEC versus Coinbase lawsuit. We'll discuss a little bit about this in the future as well, because of course it could impact price action if the SEC by some way gives actual guidance, prayers, but we'll see if that happens. But this is another thing that is set to take place, I believe, tomorrow on the 13th. So we don't know. None of this is slated. There's no 6 a.m., 9 a.m. announcement like there is with CPI and PPI and FOMC. But tomorrow should be quite interesting after we get the CPI news. So, guys, what happened this weekend? I think the rumors were that the lawsuit against Coinbase and Binance, along with the kind of after effects, it seems like everybody's delisting the assets that were deemed securities by the SEC. Of course, still needs to be proven in a court of law, but these businesses are trying to protect their bottom line and any other lawsuits against them by delisting these assets. Now, obviously, the assets in question, ADA, Matic, Sol, just to name a few, down 15, 20, 25% in weekend trading. BNB, I think, dropped another like 5, 10, maybe 15% last night as well. So what are we to make of this heading into the week? I know, Monty, you were very bearish crypto, or at least altcoins last week, clearly vindicated today. Are you feeling that pause, no trades, add more to shorts, or even longs heading into what could be positive news during the week?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying this. Right now, I am completely flat. So all those positions I talked about last week that I was entering, things like Uniswap, Sushi Swap, and even Binance Coin, I've gone ahead and taken profit. That was a sharp move, fast move down. You don't see those often. You need to be happy with those gains, take the profits. And one thing that CJ and I were kind of joking around about is like, whenever it feels like it's too easy to make money, that's when you should take profit. So I went ahead and exited those positions, got flat in anticipation of this being a big week. Because like you pointed out, Nick, we got some big potential catalysts in both the CPI print tomorrow and the FOMC meeting. But I want to start by talking about this because I think that this is probably the main
Need you to share your screen.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sharing right now.
Okay.
I think that And so, yeah, like I said, I exited this trade. Didn't get filled here. A little annoyed with KuCoin. Didn't get filled, even though I
Do
had
we
a.
have to go through this twice? Like, I'm sorry, there was $1 of liquidity down there in these paper thin books.
I know you're right. As long as
Be
they,
grateful. That's what I was gonna say too. It's like,
Monty's
even if
trading
you
against
didn't
ghosts on
lose
the
money,
Uniswap order book.
no, I'm just grateful they didn't lose my money or misappropriate my funds. Speaking of that issue, let's talk about Binance real quick, because I think that a lot of the reason we're seeing such negative, overwhelmingly negative price action in uh, the altcoins is because of Binance. Also because of course, the securities uh, ruling. But like you said, Nick, that's not a law yet. But of course, people are being forced to sell as those assets are delisted. But also Binance. This feels almost like a potential FTX 2.0 situation here. One thing that's super interesting about Binance is how crowded that this trade has gotten over the weekend. Taking a look at CoinGlass, look at BNB's trading volume over the last 24 hours, up 300%. They're actually relatively neutral in terms of longs versus shorts. And there's like not much of a premium being paid. In fact, if you want to enter a long right now, you have to pay a premium. That's what the funding rate is on KuCoin. So right now, I think we pause. I think people are going to take profit. We're going to see some squeezing happening across the board, not just in Binance, but in many of the major names. Solana. The ones that were hit hardest, I think we'll see some significant short covering, people taking profit, and then also people getting squeezed out who didn't close out their positions. So that's why I went ahead and closed out all my positions, because we're heading into a week with multiple variables. I don't want to get caught on the wrong side of things. So I'm just waiting to see how people position themselves, what they're doing, as we head into CPI and FOMC. And then from there, I'll take action. So completely flat right now. So I'm taking a pause, but I'm ready to take action. I have that capital, locked and loaded and ready to go, depending on what we get from CPI and FOMC.
How about you, CJ? What are you looking at on the crypto charts? I know they've disgusted you recently, but with big volatility, I would assume that you're behind at least one or two moves. So anything that caught your eye or catching your eye, or more or less agree with Monty?
Yeah, I do agree with Monty. I think one thing that's interesting is perhaps some of these BTC pairs. Like, I think you're starting to see initial weakness in defined risk in ETH BTC. So just from a charting perspective, I think that one's kind of, if you look at much larger, bigger picture,
And
we've
we
been in
did
this.
discuss this a while back as well. We mentioned those equal highs and they got ran, and obviously they're rolling over right now. So just humble brag right there that we did mention a little bit of weakness on that chart a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if it continues, but that's definitely a point where I took a little bit of a shot, because I think that trade could have the potential to work
You're
in
short.
multiple
You're
market
short ETH
environments.
BTC.
Yeah, I'm not a whole lot amount. I mean, it's not a high conviction trade, but I think, like, if we do have further risk off price action, this is potentially a trade that could work in both a risk on and risk off environment, especially after we've just seen like what looks to be some distribution. Plus, I think you have this kind of perception that because everybody is staking their ETH, that somehow means it will always outperform Bitcoin during this bear market. But if things get really bad, especially if like equities experience a second macro top, then I do worry months down the line in this summer low that ETH does hit like potentially 3 digits, but I don't know. I don't want to extrapolate that far. I just like the fact that we're starting to see defined risk and there's a pretty good gap below price. So just figured it was worth mentioning.
And just for everybody who's watching who may not have the availability to trade into a BTC pair, it's actually funny if you were trading back in 16, 17, it was tough to find a USDT pair back then. But for people who may not have ETH BTC pairs, just to fully go over it, if you wanted to take that type of trade, you would long Bitcoin. You would short Ethereum and long Bitcoin of equal weights. and you would let that trade sit. And of course, you may see, a decrease of, unrealized P&L on the Bitcoin long, but the idea is the ETH short would be much greater than that long. Therefore, the difference is the profit that you take home. So just for everybody who it's a bit more of a sophisticated trade, but something you can still take on a single exchange.
Yeah,
so,
I know. I know I was just
Go ahead.
complaining about KuCoin, but their cross margin feature is actually very nice and would be a good way to get a similar exposure to, this position. So that's one way you can play it too.
So let's pull up Bitcoin. So just to kind of touch base on where we're at, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my chart right here. So, what I'm looking at is, and just to zoom out a little bit, got this, it keeps snapping. So we swept the lows, over the weekend from, very early in June. So typically, if you're trying to trade this, what you'd want is, kind of double bottom action, price eventually. And I'll get rid of these squigglies because they pertain to some very early stuff that we send the TTC community. But what you'd want to see is, it's hovering just around the weekly VWAP. And this is certainly a time in life where we could have, a $500, $1,000 range, and we just sit there and suffer. I know in 2019, it was, $100 range that you were suffering in. So does not mean we need to break one way or the other, but what you'd want if you are bullish, I think, is a reclaim of this, 25.6 level, move up to the previous week's VWAP, and eventually try and reclaim 26.5. And if you remember 26.5, that's the kind of support level that we've had, which has been a critical line in the sand. You've had multiple deviations over it, and now we're kind of stuck under it. So if we do end up, trying retagging the 26.5 level, what you'd look for is a sharp rejection off of that. If you get a sharp rejection, you'll probably see shorters come in to at least short all the way back down to 25.4, potentially 24.8 or 25K, which coincides with the highs that we traded in back in February. And of course, if you accept above that, meaning price, trades above it for several hours or half a day, depending on what kind of time frame you're looking at, then you would, want to long 26.5 and have very similar price action to this. Now, one thing I would mention, and just to, add more lines to the chart, is this downtrend has been tested, but has not broken through. So if we do end up reclaiming 26.5 and moving back up to potentially 27.2, which is the highs of last week, then what you would you'd expect similar to what you'd want at 26.5. You get a sharp rejection here, then you get sent back to 26.5, and then potentially deviation all the way lower. So if you kind of just think about general price action, that's exactly what happened here. Double bottom, it swept the lows, moved up to the top of the trend, dropped all the way back down to the next support level, and then kind of repeated that similar price action. So it's not out of bounds to think that we hold here and then potentially move up to 27.5, something like that. But I will say that all of that context included, in my opinion, like let's look at the weekly really quick. And CJ Monty, if you have any thoughts on this, please feel free to hop in while I'm kind of talking, because sometimes I do end up thinking out loud in this type of stuff. But looking at the weekly, that's a pretty effing weekly candle, in my opinion. It didn't close below the lows, but you've got a pretty much an entire bearish engulfing, hovering around the lows right now. So in my opinion, I think we are more likely to move down to the 24K area than we are likely to move back up to 27. But CJ Monty, what are your thoughts here? Because I know you guys, are clearly flat and being patient, but what are we thinking in terms of building ideas for this next move?
I think this is an environment that's ripe for revenge trading. I think it's a very good environment to lose money in. I think if you were to try to compare this to any time in history, it'd be wise to study 2019 and 2020, which was generally a period of time very choppy, not a lot of massive swings. I mean, we're talking about a massive move that happened on Friday. Some of the alts moved like 20%. That's not that much of a move in a bull market. That was like every day. So we've been conditioned by the market for these big moves. And I think Monty's right. Like, you just got to kind of wait for some clear opportunities in other markets we can talk about. But in terms of crypto, considering 2019 was a pretty miserable time to trade in 2020, in the short run, I'm kind of just like sitting things out. I think there'll be a lot more clarity on the overall market once we see CPI and FOMC following Wednesday. And, I think Thursday will be a really interesting show because we'll be able to recap all of that, and we'll probably have a much clearer idea of like the next week or two.
I agree. And
Sorry,
one note
that's
I
a bit
forgot to make is
factory.
we're expecting a pretty good drop in CPI here. Not a big one in core, but for the headlines that may come, if we get a 4.9 to 4.0 drop, you'll definitely see some positivity, at least snap reaction. So something
Speaking
to
of
watch
headlines, do you mind? Actually, I'll let you finish, Russ. I just have
no.
one.
That was it. That was just kind of giving context. If you've got I know you're the king of the headline tracking. So do you have one for us?
This is a big one. Yeah, this is a big one. We got.
I'm pulling up your chart.
You guys seen it? Oh no, I'm sharing the wrong thing. My bad.
Yeah. Same chart, but you got a couple of tabs up there.
Yeah, I mean, is there a more diverse show on YouTube than this show? I mean, we talk about crypto, Uniswap. Phoenix is asking about orange juice because CJ talks about that. So I mean, we touch all the bases.
We haven't even name dropped he who must not be named yet either.
That's right. That's right. And I do want to get to that eventually, but CJ, find that article cover because it's.
All right, I'm just going to share my entire screen. How's this?
There we go.
Do you see the bull now?
Yes. Forget the naysayers.
Beautiful 3D NFT bull.
That looks very close to the Miami bull that was there.
It does.
You guys were there. Anyways, here we go. It's official, right? The case for optimism as a resilient market continues to disappoint the bears. So we had a big shift in equity positioning following last week. If you look at the yellow here, this is from crowdedmarketreport.com, but the COT data in futures, we don't have them net long just yet, but there's been a lot of short covering in the equities, which is just Dow, ES, NASDAQ, and Russell conglomerated here. But I mean, look at how much less long commercials got. And so that was a reflection of really pushing price up higher. And for me, ES was the last like long position in equities right here in terms of edge. We had 100 on the oscillator that ultimately led to a lot of shorts getting squeezed out. But now the edge is kind of gone, at least from a positioning standpoint, because we're back towards a neutral level around 50 to 70 on ES. And it's just people are, there's been a lot of short covering. So there's not a whole lot of fuel to drive the market higher in the short run. I think following FOMC and CPI, you could see a big spike, but then I don't really know what the next catalyst would be, especially now that we're starting to see neutral positioning. So I would like to short the equities here, but like following my COT system, like I'm not going to get short because I'm just not getting a signal. So I'm looking for other markets to express that similar view. One of the markets that is showing some very crowded behavior is fixed income. Everybody's still kind of with the idea of, let's get paid to wait, free 4%, right? But we are very crowded and are in kind of accumulation territory, at least as it's been for commercials. So if we have a credit event similar to SVB, if things get bad, then this ultimately, I think, would be the most favorable place to be because of the positioning. Like we have so much shorts that could presumably get forced to cover if something like that were to occur with the market dropping and, and the clear case of that, or the clear example is what we saw during SVB. That was a very large spike in the market. So this is an interesting risk off trade that we might be rotating to following FOMC, but I think things could be quite bullish. The
Well,
other trade.
Oh,
Sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, I was gonna kind of segue into a FOMC question, but I'll let you finish your other trade so we get more discussion points.
Yeah, this is the last trade in terms of following the FOMC, and I did take a starter position in this one last week, but I think I did mention it briefly too. But this is Japanese yen as well. We're starting to see the currency markets shift from being crowded to the US dollar and crowded shorts in euro. They've come off a lot. The dollar squeeze over the last few weeks has shaken a lot of those shorts out. So now, if I want to play that market to the long side in more of a risk off kind of perspective, I would look at Japanese yen longs because risk is becoming defined and we are at max crowded positioning. So I don't know necessarily the direction of where price is going to go. However, if we do break up, there's a good chance that a lot of shorts are going to be forced to cover and I'll be able to have an edge in capturing their losses. If I'm wrong, we're stopped out for 20 to 50 basis points of loss, and then we go to a different idea. But that's generally the thought process behind what I'm seeing this week. And aside from that, I'm really not taking any significant positions, even though there probably will be a lot of volatility.
So my question on the follow-up is, what are we thinking around FOMC? I know, I've kind of told, I said on B3 Radio and I told the TTC community today, I think if you're trying to trade FOMC directly, it's better to take a reactionary position, in my opinion, just based on the variance of opinion around what will take place, whether it's a 25 basis point hike or lack thereof, meaning no hike at all. But around the no hike, you typically assume, it's 0 basis points, they're pausing, bull, we're ready to go. But if Jerome Powell gets up there and says, no hike today, but we're very much considering hikes in July or the subsequent meetings, the markets may take that in a negative way because, other central banks did that. I believe, I think Canada did that. There's another central bank that's coming to mind that I was reading about this morning. Maybe Australia or something like that did a pause and then hiked, again after a couple months. So this is something that central banks around the globe have done. So it's not entirely unusual, but US typically doesn't follow everybody else's lead. We're typically kind of our own trend, if you will. So what are you, CJ, maybe to start and then Monty hops in. But what are you thinking around FOMC? And, kind of give, maybe an indication of what you may think happened based on the FOMC announcement, meaning 25 basis points bearish, 0-point hike with, indication that they're going to hike more, bearish, 0-point hike without any, future indication, maybe bullish. So how are you guys looking to interpret, what's upcoming, or do you have no interest at all? You'd rather just wait for the Thursday session to jump back in?
Yeah, so I mean, my opinion doesn't really have much to do with how I'm executing my trading. They're kind of separate. But if I were to speculate and kind of guess, I think it's going to be bullish. I think it's going to be pretty bullish regardless. Inflation has had a tendency to come down somewhat faster than it's gone up. Now, what I worry about is following the day, because after that, there probably isn't a whole lot more bullish catalysts. And what we talked about, I mean, it feels like weeks now, is looking for news failure events and how important they are for entering in trades and defining risk. So let's say, for instance, we gap up on really bullish news, low CPI prints, Fed's going to pause. That should be really bullish for the market, and we should rally, much, much higher. But if we don't, and price, gaps up and closes down, I think that's a great news failure event in which people are like, this should be bullish. Why are we closing lower? Because we have squeezed out a lot of shorts, as you can see by that COT data. Doesn't mean we can't go higher in the short term, but that's the news failure event that I'll be watching for.
How about you, Monty?
Well, I hate to be the wet blanket. Actually, I kind of enjoy it a little bit, actually, to be honest. But I do agree that if we get bullish prints in both the CPI and we get that 0 basis rate hike, we see positive price action in equities. But what does that mean for Bitcoin? I don't know that translates into positive price action for Bitcoin. this correlation between Bitcoin and equities is more or less gone since everything that's been happening. Right now, the most important thing for Bitcoin is clearly regulation. That's what's driving everything in the space. So if we do get, positive catalysts this week, I think we see some, short covering, some squeezes in those assets that were down 20% over the weekend. But ultimately, if we get, if we do get those positive catalysts, I don't think it will translate into significantly positive price action for Bitcoin. I don't think it will continue, beyond 24 hours. So if that does happen, and we get that positive on both ends, then I expect equities to rally and Bitcoin to disappoint us. That's me being the wet blanket. However, one thing that you also should watch out for is if we miss or we do get that 25 basis point rate hike. If that's the case, then I think we see Bitcoin tank because the correlation to the upside may be gone, but I don't think the correlation to the downside is gone yet. When things go risk off, everything tends to go risk off. And if that's the case, I would look out below and even consider, taking on some shorts in some of the assets that I took profit in today, like Uni and Sushi. So,
yeah, we were kind of talking about this before the show. FOMC, I kind of agree with a little bit of both CJ and Monty. I really don't know. I really think it could go equally bullish or bearish depending on what happens. So this is one FOMC where I think it's best to definitely don't overextend yourself. If you have a bias or conviction, play it. You should, with obviously stop losses and intelligent trade management. But I think this is one where I'm probably not going to play it too much. But that being said, in terms of crypto, I think crypto has less of a bullish chance than equities does. And that much I very much agree, or in that case, I very much agree with Monty, because just based on the trajectory, based on the overhang, based on the the government kind of situation we find ourselves in. And in relation to current price action, while I definitely do not think we will see multiple large cascades like we saw at from 3AC, FTX, Luna, I do think that this is a time where these cascades that we're experiencing now, while they're short in terms of the overall price chart, I do think that they can happen a little bit more often than we expect. Due to the only situation that seems to really be the bane of crypto, at least in the near term, is government intervention or the blowing up or forced selling of assets. And I think this scenario presents a double whammy of both. We just saw the first round of forced selling. We don't know if anything is going to come. There are still continued rumors of more SEC lawsuits and potential DOJ criminal lawsuits, which could then force more selling so companies can afford these lawsuits. And of course, we don't know what the permeation is going to look like in terms of other companies and assets being affected. And it seems like even though a few assets were listed, many assets also took the force of those claims by the SEC. So in my opinion, I don't think you should really be looking for longs. And I think if you're saying I'm DCAing here for the future, I think right now you should probably be a little bit more patient and prudent in terms of the news cycle until you see a snap reaction, until you see something actually legitimately positive. And I don't think Gary Gensler being fired, or at least, the congressman that just, announced legislature to fire Gary, that's not going to pass. That's wishful thinking, but it's definitely in the right direction. That's not going to move the needle. You really need something like Binance is going to settle with the SEC. Binance is settling with the CFTC. Something like that is going to bring us, back on track where you can say this buy at $25,000 really makes sense long term because of the signal we just received. So that's my indication, and therefore I am going to continually be looking for shorts in the near term. Set it on B3 yesterday. As long as we're under 26.5K, my bias is short. Unless we reclaim that, I will flip my bias. But underneath it, I'm short for now. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Before we move into any other things, I know I kind of went on for like 5 minutes there. So CJ, Monty, any rebuttal or comments on any of that stuff?
No, I agree with you completely. And one thing I wanted to point out was that, I'm very glad that the SEC's being put on a clock with Coinbase in terms of their lawsuit. Like, force them to take action. And that's finally happening, right? Because it's been so ambiguous about what the SEC is going to do, with Coinbase, with crypto in general. So we have not only do we have a CPI print and an FOMC meeting, but we also have that lawsuit against Coinbase being settled within a week. So now they're on the clock. They have to take action. Coinbase is down 5% today. So it looks like people are thinking that the outcome is going to be negative for Coinbase. That's where most traders are what they're expecting. But we will see. So that's going to be a massive catalyst, not just for Coinbase, but I think for altcoins in general, because it's going to give us a little bit more of an indication on how the SEC is going to regulate this space going forward.
100%. And yeah, I mean, I just think I think there's just going to be more news. There's going to be more things that we don't want to hear. I have a feeling. And therefore, I mean, if you're really talking about 10-year horizon, you're probably nibbling as long as there's a 2 to start with Bitcoin's price, probably nibbling. And I'm not going to take away from that. But anyone who thinks that if you're going to get a solid return on this value in 3 to 6 months, I think you have to kind of rethink your thinking. And therefore, when I'm kind of asking myself this question in 3 to 6 months, even if we're flat, I'd still rather be net short because and in that scenario, I'm still not, entirely losing anything. And I feel like I'm on the right side of the trade, but time will tell. So, and my bias could change Thursday, depending on the FOMC meeting, CPI, and against their comment on Wednesday, so be ready to change that opinion and that bias that you have at the drop of a dime, so to speak.
And also everyone feels like they need to be in a position at all times. Like, being flat is a position in itself. So there's nothing wrong with, waiting through these catalysts, waiting for more clarity, then taking action. Sorry for interrupting, CJ. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I'd nibbled a little Coinbase today. Please don't do that. Please don't go out and buy Coinbase. I'm just thinking, if they do win or if there is a favorable outcome, that's pretty interesting risk reward. Also, think about how bad things feel around Coinbase right now and how sketchy the space is in general. It's kind of feels like a very contrarian play, which is not always the wisest thing to do, right? You can get run over in many cases being a contrarian, but I do think that when you look out a few years down the line and things do recover, or if they recover, could be a very interesting migration between customers from Binance to these new perp exchanges opened by Coinbase and Gemini. Because if you do have a loss of trust within customers in Binance International, they would be willing to speculate somewhere else like Coinbase perps, especially when you're doing it through a regulated United States company. I think you could see a customer migration, and that could be the one thing Coinbase actually makes a massive comeback for. It's an interesting story. I don't know if it'll happen, but that's just kind of what I was thinking. And I don't think sentiment, it's horrible right now. That is the truth.
Yeah, and then it's why we're kind of, I went over Bitcoin as kind of the grand, I mean, if you look at everything, it's very much high beta to Bitcoin or ETH right now, and ETH is more or less high beta to Bitcoin. So if you kind of understand where Bitcoin's headed and you have an alt that you hate, I think L2s are really going to come under attack. Anything that's had a fantastic start to 2023, like INJ, I'm keeping my eye on just because of how well it's outperformed. Now, it still has a couple of things that could take away from an extreme bearish event because it has, I think, a $150 million innovation fund that they've been deploying. So that's been a big reason for the boost. But anything that's overperformed in 2023, that's at the precipice of looking gross. And I think, when you're talking about the precipice of looking gross, watch back to our videos of Monty talking about Uni, because I think, he, even though that was sitting at support, and you typically don't want to start shorting there, he saw the writing on the wall and took the chance. So I think you can still do that, but I would again encourage people, don't put your whole port on the line the day before CPI, PPI, and FOMC. I think that's just kind of goes without saying. So one trade that I did want to mention, because I think CJ has a few things on the TradeFi side that I definitely want to have time to discuss. The one thing that I wanted to mention is XRP before we get off the crypto horse. And that is because of obviously the news tomorrow. And just looking at this chart compared to any other altcoin, I wouldn't call it strong, but it's not weak. And I think that's an interesting thing in crypto, especially with where we're at. So this is 9 a.m. Pacific on Tuesday the 13th tomorrow. So about 12 p.m. Eastern. I don't know when the news is going to drop, but I've kind of just put this as my flagpole of when I think it's probably time to start thinking about reversing your bias. So thinking about XRP, do we think we're getting back up here before tomorrow? And do we think we're shorting at this line after the news is released? CJ or Monty, either one, feel free to take this one.
That's a good question, Nick. When I see a chart like this look at these massive candles, like it's not like any of these moves have been slow. When it moves down fast. When it moves up fast. That tells me that people are making big bets on this decision tomorrow. And it feels like a coin flip, really. Like, and that's not a trade I want to be taking. 50-50 odds, I don't like that. Like, that's not something I'm interested in. Ultimately, I do think that XRP, will top at the top of that range that you had previously highlighted and that you have highlighted there with that first white line. Might go a little bit beyond that if too many people try and short it. But in the long term, I think tomorrow's news will be bearish for XRP. I think we see ultimately negative price action. And this one will, head back down to retest the lows ultimately. So, tomorrow's a big day for XRP, but I think if you are a bag holder, you'll be disappointed with, how it plays out following.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are expecting this price action, which, I guess you could also flip to the Bitcoin chart, draw a line down to 25K and be like, a lot of people are expecting this price action. But, that anytime the crowd is that decided on something, because I think Bitcoin, there's still a lot of argument as to whether or not we go higher or lower, but XRP it's been for everyone you talk to, myself included, over the past couple of weeks, which is why I stopped trading it after the Friday drop, because I was like, I don't care what news is dropping on Tuesday. If alts are dropping 20%, I'm not long in junk. So, well, other than, some small scalps or whatever, but, anyone who kind of, had the balls to keep that long all the way to today, kudos to you. But, I think it's been double topped right here. Couldn't get there this time. Sharp rejections every single time. In my history of crypto, what this is telling me is that someone's been accumulating into the news. They've been selling every time it hits the demand zone. And they're probably just going to sell the whole clip when the news or after the news drops. I mean, I think this is Monty, CJ. We've been around the block a couple of times. I feel like this entire formation, unless the news says XRP not a security tomorrow, we're probably going to sell off on the release of the news. Do you guys agree?
It's funny how much this has been built up, like over years now. There's people who have been playing this trade, it feels like, for quite some time, where they're like, okay, well, we'll just buy before the lawsuit, and then once the result comes out, we're just going to sell it.
Well, I mean, if you've been trading it up for a couple of weeks, you haven't been wrong. But also, again, talking about, even highs, it's right back at the freaking demand zone from the highs of March and the highs of October. So this zone is clearly extremely difficult to break through. And everybody's and their brother's going to say, oh, well, it's a ascending triangle, we're moving up. But I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, CJ.
That's about all I had.
I mean, CJ is right, though. Like, this has been a narrative that's been prevalent for so long, and finally we're getting an answer. Like, this could be exciting. I remember, like, Bitcoin 2020, I was arguing with a guy about.
I know, this guy.
Me and this guy argued for like an hour about the merits of XRP. I'm like, dude, you could have put your money in any other asset. You'd be up 400% right now. Now you're sitting, break even barely. He's like, no, but I still think like if we get a favorable decision, I'm like, why are you waiting? Put it in something else that's moving.
Monty, the banks are going to use it. Don't you know? It's the
Well,
only
you
regulated
know what everyone's
cryptocurrency.
dying wish is that they spent more time on the internet arguing with strangers. So,
No, this was face to face in real life. This
okay.
guy, but like when I was talking to this guy, and whenever you meet someone like this that's so deeply committed to an asset they're holding, they don't understand what they're holding. They're just being like, it's like a religious thing. It's like this guy was, no matter what I said to him, I could have taken out XRP's white paper, compared it to Bitcoin's, laid it out mathematically for him why, buying Bitcoin here would be better and why you would have had better returns in the last 4 years. It wouldn't matter. He didn't care about anything I was saying. All that he wanted to hear was that XRP is going to go up. And that's all those bag holders want to hear. I think they're going to be very disappointed tomorrow.
All right. Well, again, we don't know when that news is going to be released, but it is allegedly set for release tomorrow. So we'll obviously, check our team socials and our personal socials as well for any more information, as we will likely, continue that discussion online and in our communities tomorrow. So talked about crypto a lot, clearly not sexy or performing well, but we definitely let our thoughts be heard. So what are we thinking about equities, CJ? And are there any, it doesn't even have to be equities, I guess TradeFi in general. Of course, again, just to say it for anyone who's watching, we have CPI tomorrow, we have PPI Wednesday, we have FOMC Wednesday as well. So big week. Anything catching your eye? You talked about the yen before. I think someone made a joke about the orange juice futures in the chat, but anything else catching your eye? SPYs and Qs are notably, still up near those equal highs from earlier in the year. And of course, big news up ahead. So anything catching your eye?
Yeah, like I said, I think, if I just had to guess, this week is probably going to be pretty bullish, my best guess. But overall, I think the assets that are crowded and I could potentially have an edge in are going to be Japanese yen, and then also fixed income, more specifically 5-year notes, because they have the most crowded positioning. And then the final one would be cocoa. It's had a nice reversal candle today. And on Friday, the news was that it extended its rally because of the El Nino storm that has basically created concerns around supply. So that's been pushing price higher. But now we've had pretty nice reversal candle today where we gapped up and then closed down. So figured
That cocoa made in what, South America?
I think,
or
yeah.
Central America?
I would assume.
Yeah, here I actually saw some El Nino news like over the weekend. I was like, why am I getting alerts for El Nino? I guess they wanted me to short some cocoa futures.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that empirical discussion Monty had with the XRP fanatic at the Bitcoin Miami conference, where he's sitting him down and saying, "Look, Bitcoin went up 5 times the amount that XRP does, therefore it's 5 times as good."
That's math. That's math.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, it's I wish we had more to discuss in terms of trade ideas or price action, but I think, and this is something I think is funny on the internet, because you'll see the people who aren't the most professional at their jobs or have the most experience trading will jump in and say, this is what I'm doing here. Price action did this, so it's going to do this, and we're going to get this, and I need to be positioned for this. And it's like, anyone who's been around the block a couple of times knows that after a large price action move, at best, you're going to get consolidation. Or I should say, at worst, you're going to get consolidation. At best, you get another micro move to where it either just extends out to the, a previous price position that it was at, in terms of the gray move. Meaning, just to give you an example, because that sounds a little bit confusing and like I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but what I'm saying right here is, and I'm sorry, I'm pulling up my Bitcoin chart.
The market's going to make us all look like fools over and over again. It's just the nature of the game we play.
So when I say at worst, you have consolidation here, meaning, if you're going to get, pained if you don't, close at the extremes, but we dropped here, we moved a little bit higher, so people stacking the longs, then we move right back down to the same price, and that's typically a lot of times what you'll look for in terms of those moves. So unless this like low holds, like there's no reason to stack longs. And if price does move extreme way, unless you catch that added extreme to where it's tagging that same price right there, then nobody is making a whole lot of money right here unless they're sitting in front of the computer 12 hours a day, because you have to time the lows perfectly, you have to time the highs perfectly, or else you're getting chopped up or losing your gains to fees and such in the middle. And look how this, look how it's growing tighter in terms of price action. You had these large swings, now we're going tighter. That means that whatever explosion either way is just going to be that much more painful, and therefore you should be positioned for the breakout than trying to trade the breakout, in my opinion, because we could just do this, could just do that. And until we firmly break one of those levels, then you don't really know what's going to happen. So always best to be patient. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, guys. Save everybody 10, 15 minutes. Anything else in terms of patterns or price action or anything else that has caught your eye before we get out of here?
Please hit the like button, guys, if you enjoyed the content today. We appreciate that. Monty, I'll quit the Barry Shilbert impersonation. Pass to you, my friend.
No, that was quite the impersonation. Yeah, smash the like, please. But yeah, this is going to be an awesome week, a really exciting week. And I think Thursday's episode is going to be our best yet, because we're going to have so much to talk about. Like I said, I'm flat right now. If that changes, I'll be sure to let you guys know. But just staying flat. You can follow CJ and I over at markrebellion.com/try crypto, where we share our insights on a 24/7 basis. But yeah, really looking forward to this week and trading with you guys. I think it's going to be a fun one. So that's all I got.
Thank you very much, Monty. Thank you very much, CJ. And just to kind of pick it up, for Monty, I am currently have a couple of shorts outstanding from, a little bit from up at the top before we dropped on Friday, and a little bit from, yesterday's highs in the morning. But certainly, much, much lower than how much I would typically trade or, jump into a big week like this. So again, if you would like to try out Trade the Chain, www.tradethechain.com. We'll have a couple of announcements upcoming in the near future that you guys do not want to miss, and some really fun things happening as well. So appreciate everybody being here. Monty said it best. Thursday may be our best show yet. It's gonna be a party. And we hope that it will be, the party will be made with all of the profits that we have from earlier in the week. So good luck. Happy trading. We'll see everybody Thursday. And again, watch out for CPI, PPI, and FOMC Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. Have a good one.